Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, the aftermath of Israel's long-anticipated strike on Iran.
Israel has launched multiple airstrikes on Iran in response to what the Israeli military called months of continuous attacks from Tehran and its proxies.
We'll look at what was hit, what was not, and if both Iran and Israel have already passed the point of no return. I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take.
My name's Alex Gatopolous. I'm defense editor for Al Jazeera English TV, and I live and work here in Doha in Qatar.
Okay, so Alex, on October 1st, Iran sent around 200 projectiles into Israel in response for the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. So at the time, Israel promised that Iran would pay. For nearly a month now, the world has been holding its breath to see how Israel would respond. Now we know. So first, just tell us what happened.
So the whole operation looked like it involved about 100 Israeli aircraft.
We conducted targeted and precise strikes on military targets in Iran, thwarting immediate threats to the state of Israel.
And they were launched in 3 waves. So the first wave went in and destroyed air defense radar systems in Syria and in Iraq. And then the consequent waves, the second lot, punched through that gap, that corridor. And it looks like they released standoff weapons. So most, if not all, of these aircraft actually didn't fly over the border. So most of them fired their weapons before they got to Iran proper as well. Concerned in part with obviously Israeli pilots being shot down, etc., as anyone would, but it looks like they damaged some of so the targets were broken down into several areas, and this is the message that was being sent. You have air defenses around oil refineries destroyed, but not the oil refineries themselves. You have a missile solid fuel development plant that was hit in Parchin, which is in the area around Tehran. It's about 30, 40 kilometers away from it. That was hit. A drone manufacturing site was hit. So this was a very, very coded message. Now, there were certain, obviously, when I've just relayed that list, there's some glaring omissions from there about flights that weren't hit.
Yeah, let me ask you about that, because what wasn't hit is almost more important than what was hit.
Israel struck military sites in Iran early on Saturday, but did not appear to strike sensitive oil and nuclear targets after urgent calls from allies for restraint.
Why is it so significant that Israel avoided nuclear enrichment sites and oil production sites?
Well, they were warned off. They were warned off it but for a start. Biden turned around and was very clear that he would not allow his administration to help and in the bombing of any nuclear sites. This is something that Netanyahu has tried to lure the United States into because obviously the help of the United States would make it the job that much more complete. And the United States has so far resisted this in successive administrations, by the way, Bush Jr. and under Obama, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that they know would cause untold problems, and never mind the environmental, radiological catastrophe that could actually emerge from this. Also, the knock-on effect politically and therefore militarily, as you're just unleashing a hornet's nest, and no one needs it. And especially now, this is in the run-up coming to the election. You know, the Biden administration or the Kamala Harris administration, no one needs this. No one needs this to happen a week beforehand and create another kind of regional war, which was frankly on the cards and everybody has been very, very clear about. And the oil, China has warned Israel off. Russia has warned Israel off. Everybody has chimed in and said, you know, they're a major member of OPEC. They're a major oil exporter. Let's just leave that stuff alone. Is there any other way you can teach them a lesson or retaliate in some way where they get the message? And Israel seems to have struck that balance.
Iran's foreign minister says Tehran is determined to defend itself after Israel carried out retaliatory strikes on military targets across Iran.
So I think the basic consensus here is that this could have been a lot worse. So I want to ask you about the responses from the three main nations involved here, Israel, Iran, and the United States. Let's start with Israel, where Prime Minister Netanyahu is actually striking a defensive tone. He's fending off criticism from his right flank that the strikes didn't go far enough. How's that playing out in Israel?
Well, that's right. He's being criticized by the far right. Unfortunately, Israel is governed by a coalition of which Netanyahu is pretty much the least extreme. So that gives you an idea of just where we are in that political spectrum. And of course, there were many within Israel, especially amongst the far right, that felt that this is the big opportunity. Israel's been talking about striking Iran for over a decade plus. So, they feel they should have done a better job of doing it. But that's not what they were trying to achieve. They wanted to punish Iran, make them suffer a little and be seen to be doing something that wasn't too anemic as a response as well. And also sending a message about what could be destroyed in later potential attacks. That's if Iran decides to retaliate.
So Iran is boasting that the attacks on military centers have been, quote, successfully intercepted. But I think there's deep skepticism around some of those claims. How do you think Iran's defenses fared?
Poorly. They may have shot some of the missiles down. They sent, from the targets that I saw destroyed in satellite imagery, they were precise. They were, they sent a very clear message. And they also managed to degrade Iran's missile building capabilities. They hit them at rather a weak spot, which was not so much the creation of the missiles themselves, but the area where you're going to be making the solid fuel that goes into the missiles. So damaging these sites also, by the way, degrades Iran's ability to be able to export any of these missiles. And there was a drone manufacturing site that was damaged too, wasn't damaged, destroyed. So you have that, and that will have an impact on Iran's ability to be able to make drones, say, for Russia in its war in Ukraine. So yes, they've done some serious damage. They destroyed the S-300s that they attacked, and these were sited around oil refineries and everything. They didn't touch the oil refineries themselves, but they effectively defanged the Revolutionary Guards and destroyed those sites around them, saying this tacit message that next time we're going to get the sites themselves.
After the break, could this strike de-escalate the conflict? Alex, I want to ask about the regional politics at play here. The Iranians were very clear to American partners, especially here in the Gulf, that if their facilities were part of the attack, they would be considered fair game for retaliation. Do you think that those warnings affected how Israel carried out the attack?
I think the warnings had an effect on some of the GCC members, and I think others, to be honest, didn't need to be warned. Many of the member states have been very vocal in their condemnation of the war on Gaza and now on Lebanon as well. And they feel that this is a dramatic escalation of hostilities and can lead to absolute chaos in the region. And they've been, and not just that, extreme loss of civilian life. Take Qatar, for example. The Emir of Qatar has been extremely vocal, and his representatives has been extremely vocal about how this should stop, how we are heading towards the abyss of regional war. But it's not just Qatar, it's also other member states as well. So in some ways, maybe some of the countries heeded it. Either way, whether it comes from your own heart or you were actually told to do it or warned to do it, either way, I think the message was received loud and clear.
Okay. So by all accounts, this was a very calculated response. I'll ask you the million-dollar question. Do you think this could mark the end of these tit-for-tat exchanges between Iran and Israel?
Possibly. I mean, I don't want to hedge my bets, but possibly. I mean, look, Iran has said it will respond in some way, shape, or form. Now, is that going to be minor? Is this going to be one of the things where they turn around and say, well, you don't understand the Iranian people, we're not going to be easily cowed. And then they'll start something else, which of course Israel will respond to. And then you're going to have this coded dialogue of violence that's going to go on and on and on. Or is it sufficient? There's going to be enough of a gap and world events precede them and everybody just forgets about it for a bit.
Right. We're not waking up here saying, well, Israel or Iran has to respond. They have to do something. We're not really feeling that. It does feel like it's got the possibility of tampering things down.
I think it's within the zone. And I think because it's in the zone, this was very carefully calculated by Israel. And we're talking about an Israeli administration that has shown itself to be punchy, has shown itself to be bellicose. Like, they're not afraid of a fight. They're not, in fact, they're, more than willing. But by the same token, this was calibrated to say, enough, we've hurt you, you hurt us, let's just leave it there.
Okay, so I do wonder if the point of some of this is to take our eye off of the real war, which is happening in Gaza and it's happening in southern Lebanon. That's certainly what the Iranians are saying. I read this weekend, Alex, that the Israeli military set off such strong explosives in Lebanon that it triggered earthquake warnings in Israel.
Yeah.
Think about that. Seismic readings in another country. What is the latest developments that you're monitoring in Lebanon? And then we'll close with Gaza.
You have, depending on how you count it, between 4 and 5 divisions worth of troops, between 60 to 80,000 Israeli soldiers on the border, hundreds of tanks, artillery pieces, but it's still mainly an air war. Okay, so unlike 2006, unlike 1982, the Israelis are very much on the border. They're going in, they're conducting sweeping operations, but these operations are literally a kilometer or two in, and they are either kind of holding it or controlling it, depending, but they're not going any further in. So this is very, very, very slow and deliberate because they're astute enough. They don't really want to be lured into any kind of series of ambushes, which is exactly what happened in 2006, where they got caught by Hezbollah and were surprised on many an occasion. So this is mainly an air war, with the air force and drones constantly bombing, as you said, some of this ordnance being registered in Israel itself as an earthquake warning, which gives you an idea of what this is like when you're bombing. You might call it a command post. You might call it a something center control, whatever it is, a headquarters.
You might call it a hospital.
These are in civilian areas. These are in villages and towns and cities, and you're letting off 2,000-pound plus bombs with a lethal radius of 50 to 100 meters. I mean, whole blocks are being demolished here.
So, Alex, the world is really distracted right now. You have these Iran strikes, you have Joe Rogan interviews with Trump, you have Beyonce, she's stumping with Kamala Harris. Meanwhile, in northern Gaza, the news today was, 6 buildings were bombed in Beit Lahia, 45 people were killed. I mean, you're seeing images on Al Jazeera of children being pulled from the rubble. I mean, it's so horrible. You can understand people's impulse to just tune it out, but we're not going to do that here, obviously. Can you attempt to describe what Israel is doing sort of from an operational standpoint in northern Gaza and whether it can even be called a war at this point?
Well, northern Gaza was in terrible shape pretty much from the beginning. It was bombed very heavily. Then you had the 98th Paratroop Division, backed by armor, all the rest of it, and artillery, fighting Hamas fighters, hard urban warfare. And the place was pretty much destroyed. I know accounts of people that left the south to go north when there was fighting in the south, and they went to the north and they ended up coming back because they said there's nothing in the north. There's no reason for us to stay there. The housing's flattened. There is no infrastructure. There's certainly no water. There's no electricity. I mean, it is absolutely being ground down now. And also, since the siege, which has been going on for over 2 weeks now, 85%, something like that, of the food aid has been stopped from going into the enclave, and there's still tens of thousands of people there, and people now who have been moved and displaced several times. And it's an important note to remind people when we're talking about refugees and everything, it's within the Gaza enclave itself, which is walled in, fenced in. They can't leave that enclave. They can't run away. No one can run away. This is a war without refugees because they're all corralled in. And in the north, particularly so, they're still fighting. A year after Israel has dropped more tonnage of bombs than various landmarks and events in World War II, 85,000 tons at the last count, there's still fighting going on.
And that's The Take.